Welcome back to the Battle of Crampton's Gap. This is going to be sort of similar to Second Bull Run in that the AI is relatively passive, so we're going to use it as another opportunity to keep training up some of our infantry, even though they aren't going to be doing all that much heavy lifting. So with the career points I got, I am going to max out training so that all the recruits we get are going to be as good as possible. We do get quite a bit in the next series of battles. Going to grab the Major General that we just got and pull it out of that unit so we can boost up the snipers. Here I'm debating between going to 9 guns or 10 guns. I just end up deciding to only go to 9 to spread out the veteran cost, but this was actually a mistake because this unit is just going to gain more experience in this battle. So when I end up going to 10 guns in the next battle, I'm just going to end up paying more than what I would if I just spent the money up front. And we're not exactly hurting for money right now either. So this was definitely the incorrect decision. So with the snipers, if we dump the Major General in there, we can get the second perk. And I decided to take this set of snipers as opposed to my more experienced one because I really want to try and get this one to 2 stars by itself without needing a very high level general. And this is a easy opportunity for them to gain that experience. Not worth putting the veterans into this unit. It barely changes the stats at all. So might as well go with rookies. Here, with some of these other rifle units, the effect is a little more noticeable, so we're going to end up staying with it. But again, we took so few losses in the last battle that it really doesn't cost much. You can see that I'm noticing my command is really low. Not going to be able to do a whole lot with it unless I put a really good officer in there. But if we swap out the division officer, then things start looking a little bit better. We're still a bit behind the curve though. So in this case, if we grab Scales and drop him into Division Command, then that will solve all our issues in terms of command rates, and we're set there. And hopefully Scales will hit Brigadier General soon, and we'll be able to keep him moving up. So we're pretty low on Lorenz's, but fortunately we have 7,500 available for rep. That might be close to the most efficient rep buy in the entire game in the mod, though the cases where you can get Fayetteville's, or I guess Whitworth's, in the mod might actually be better just because of the cost. So again, debating between veterans and rookies, decided just to go with the rookies. I'm buying rifle muskets every time I upgrade those units either way. So they're already a little bit expensive, and the veterans don't really add all that much. I've really been hoping to start capturing some weapons that have a high melee value. I don't really want to buy an extra 4,000 of those for those units. But if we can get some of those, that would really make those units a lot more effective, since they'd be able to participate in the rest of the battle a little bit more, as opposed to right now being pretty much purely melee focused. Though both of the Grenadier units are getting close to 2-star. And once they hit that, they're going to be a lot more effective. Also, if we can get a Lieutenant General up and running that gets them the level 1 25% move speed, and we put the Grenadier units into a core with that, that's really going to increase their effectiveness a whole lot. And we're going to dump veterans into the 2 skirmisher units just because I want to try and get them to 2-star as soon as possible. And again, this is another easy battle to just get them some free shots without hopefully taking too much damage. It might have been a better choice to flip those Enfields out of those sharpshooters and give them something else, just because the Enfields do have a very good melee value, and if I could capture a few more of them, then we might be able to give those to the Grenadiers. We have a very high training value due to getting trainers, and armory is still pretty high. The armory is a little more worrying than the trainer, given that we've been facing nothing but 3 stars anyways. We're bringing 13 units in because of the supply fixes and the other fixes that work correctly in the UI mod. You end up getting some extra units in the Rebalance mod, which is unfortunate. The battles don't really need it, but it is, for technical reasons, it is a giant amount of work to try and fix, and so I just decided to leave it as is and figure we'll rebalance the battles to account for that a little bit more later. So as you can see, brought in a sniper, brought in 4 artillery units, kill off their artillery. Once we kill off their artillery, then we can start moving around a little bit more. The general plan is going to be to try and bait them in across the little creek there, and then slowly wipe them out from there. You can see that my units are spotted, but the AI is not going to come after them back there. In the later phase of the battle, like where my sharps unit is, sometimes if they see something, they'll go after it, but not very commonly. So we're going to leave a couple of units there. Where Weed's rifle is, you have to be a little careful. Sometimes their artillery can hit you from there, especially if like they had James's or something like that. If their artillery had ended up with like 20 pounders or something, then I would have actually probably faced some counter battery, but that's pretty unlikely at this stage of the campaign. So fairly safe doing what we're doing. I actually use a very similar strategy in the base game. So I moved the Whitworths back so they're hitting at the best part of their curve. Moved everything else forward a little bit. Starting to set up the line with the infantry. You can see they're spreading out a little bit more. I also pulled off the snipers because I know that I'm going to be pulling stuff in, and I don't really need them to spot anymore. My light infantry should be able to do that job. Backing up a little bit because I would prefer to get them to try and cross the river. They basically shouldn't try and actually fight in the river if that AI logic change is working correctly. It seems to work better in this sort of scenario than in something like Newport News, where the AI just loves to get stuck in the river and there's not much I can do about it. So I've got the Grenadier units behind in case it's a charge. We got a couple units coming up, and we'll be able to hit them in the flank. Need to be a little careful because there are sometimes units that come from further west. Speaking of the units further west, there's usually a skirmish unit. I think it's the 2nd Virginia Dismounted that's usually in the far west of the map, sitting on a vision point. I think in the base game, traditionally, what I would do is I'd set up the artillery on the right, and then when everything else came in, I would run them all along the western board edge and then sweep across from there. In this case, the artillery and supply situation allows you to just be so effective with the heavy guns that you don't really need to bother with that. But that would be another option. If you were skipping I guess if you brought less artillery or something like that and were just destroying the guns and then didn't have enough to destroy the infantry, probably going along that west side would probably still be recommended. Though I'm not sure I can't remember if I've actually tried it in this version of the mod, so you might get charged pretty heavily as you get closer. Not certain. That 15th North Carolina unit is in a weird little vision spot where I can't really see it, so I had to bring some units up there and clear him out, because otherwise he will shoot me while hidden. So to get the snipers in the middle to start going after those units there. And then we're going to start sending the supply wagon up since they seem to have lost interest in attacking us too much, we'll start sending that up there. And hopefully we can entice them to come closer and give more for the infantry to do as opposed to letting the artillery just get all the kills. Moving the siege guns out into the open where they'll do more damage. And we swapped out Cook's rifle for Weed's rifle since Cook's already taken a decent amount of damage, so we're going to put him on the flank here where he's probably not going to get shot too much more. Still nothing for that supply wagon. Though we do get that 7th Virginia Dismounted to come up. And he's actually going to get shattered. Sending the snipers over to try and start working on clearing out that small unit that routed into the corner. Not really sure what's up with that. It's an extra brigade, so it doesn't really follow a lot of the rules that a lot of the rest of the stuff does. That's a lot of the reason why I really like the unit splitting. Is it just when the AI only has exactly what it expects, it sticks to the battle plan almost exactly a lot of times, and if you give it a few more units, then it sort of mixes things up a little bit more. And not quite sure what we did here to trigger something. Maybe it was the that sharps unit moving far enough forward that it triggered a line that said, "Okay, AI, the enemy's approaching. Now go do something about it." But either way, it let us pull in most of their force, though they promptly move up a little bit and stop. But they should get close enough that the infantry could start doing some work there. And we're going to be since they don't really care about any of the units in the center, we're going to have good flanking fire. Get a charge. They definitely have some speed perks. I don't know if it's general or what, but you see we get into melee and then they just, I'm using an officer with double accuracy and then experience. I would guess they have at least one speed perk, if not two, from the general, given generally how fast all of these units are. Though they're all 3 stars, so lots of places they could have gotten speed perks from. If I could go back and change things, I definitely wanted to. I definitely messed up in my general perk selection. It would have been good to have one with 25% move speed. Would have been good to have one with double accuracy sooner. Because that 25% move speed, I think, is going to help a whole lot in terms of getting the melee units going, because they're just too slow at what they need to do at the moment with the way my army is set up, which sort of makes sense and is an expected trade-off. My army is generally built around shooting as opposed to melee, so I don't take the melee perks, so it doesn't perform particularly well in melee. Shocking. In fact, it's kind of exactly what you'd want to happen. But I want to try and make my army a little bit more diverse, so we need to get some of those generals set up. Pulling my infantry back a little bit to try and switch who's getting targeted. I want to try and spread out those casualties a little bit more if I can. But then I see another unit coming across the river, so that isn't going to work. But we're cleaning up these units pretty well, and the AI has gone back into its little turtle shell and not going anywhere again, so it'll be fine. And as you can see, if you could easily come into this map with probably a all skirmisher plus artillery setup and just blow them off the map, because you don't have too much trouble with vision. Unless you move forward, they don't tend to come after you too much. That would be the one thing. Probably bring a couple of infantry units, just because if they do start to come over, you want to have something to block them, so your artillery has time to do work. But other than that, just these little units walking up, getting hit by 4 or 5 units at once, and shattering or routing again. So we are taking decent losses on our infantry, but we are getting them some experience, so not really costing us all that much. So I decide to swing my grenadier units around to the side. I want them to go after that 4th Virginia Brigade. I want to just get into melee with it. It's isolated by itself, so it should be a relatively easy target. Though it is on a hill, which isn't a great situation. So starting to move the artillery up a little bit. I've realized that the Whitworth is out of ammunition, so I'm sending the wagon down there. Probably would have been better just to keep it next to the other stuff. It doesn't need a whole lot more kills, and that way we would have been able to get the wagon over to the sniper a little sooner. So trying to set up so I get both those grenadier units to charge that unit on the side at the same time. If you're a better melee player than I am, you can probably already see where that debacle is headed. But other than that, the rest of their army is pretty much decimated. There's just a little bit left to deal with. So you can see that unit definitely has some reload perks. I think I'm going to take something like 10 or 12 volleys before I actually get into melee range with him, which part of that is because I sit here and fire as opposed to just going. I probably should have just put both of those units on hold fire, because I'm not going to do a lot of damage with the muskets at that range, and I'm just burning condition reloading. So if I was going to charge, I should have just held fire, moved into position, charged once I get into open terrain, and hit them. So you can see we've taken, 200 casualties there, and we just lost an officer. We do all right, except they are noticeably much, much faster than us. So, they're going to get away, and we aren't able to quite shatter them, and now we are stuck in a situation where our units are close to exhausted, so they aren't going to be doing a lot of damage. Also, they're equipped with muskets and the targets in cover, so I have to bring the snipers over to hopefully try and clear out this unit, because I'm definitely not going to morale shock it at this point. I'm just going to have to grind it down. So yeah, all that was pretty poorly done. Because yeah, those, I have 4,000 men firing, but they have no condition left, so they aren't going to do any damage. Also, I think they both have 20, 25 firearms, something like that. So without accuracy perks, I guess they're at plus 50% from the general itself. So they have some, but that's still pretty mediocre. But now that we've cleared that out, we can just sort of start shifting stuff around and clear out the rest. Probably should have I don't know why I'm moving those grenadier units. They should just stop and recover. I could probably also just move the infantry just straight forward at this point, but I've already taken a decent number of losses, so it's always, for the way I like to play, it's always really hard to convince myself of how I should let something other than the artillery just do what they're going to do. But instead of letting them do that, I just send them off to gain a little bit of stamina, and then we sort of push everything forward. I also trip the flag by accident. I think the battle ends immediately when it flips over. I'm not certain. We don't really have a full list of the timers in the mod, so normally I think the battle ends pretty quickly when that flag is capped. So I'm just sort of moving everything forward to try and kill off these last couple of units before that ticks over. You can see that unit must have stealth. It's pretty well hidden because it's on a vision point. It can definitely see us. So just moving an infantry unit forward to take any fire, and now we get it, and that unit must have shattered. So after medicine, we took a little under 1,000 casualties. As you can see, artillery does most of the work, snipers do the rest, but we got some decent numbers on that infantry. So can't complain too much. Could have definitely played that better, but it'll do. Let's see, it looks like we got some 61s, some Texases. They had Tarpleys. Those are all right. If we can get enough to put them on a unit, might do something with them. And they had Parrots and Ordnance. So that Ordnance might have gotten us if we'd gotten a little too close, or if they'd had range perks or something. Hard to say. 6,000 more recruits. So we are getting real close to putting just about any officer on a unit will get them 1 star. Nothing really remarkable from the reinforcements. And, not a ton of XP, but it was pretty short, and we got a lot of units that are getting real close to that 3rd star, which is really going to pay dividends in those battles that are actually difficult. And we're going to have to start training those out in side battles because they just aren't going to be gaining experience anymore. Yeah. Pretty large units that are all very close to a 2nd star. and most of them have pretty terrible officers on them, so we could get them up there if we needed to. All right, not a lot to it, but that was Crampton's Gap. Thanks for watching.